You sent me a perfectly normal text and I disappeared for 3 days. Not because I was busy, not because I didn't see it, but because your message triggered something in me that I couldn't name and didn't know how to face. While you were wondering what you did wrong, I was having a complete emotional breakdown over 7 words that should have made me happy. Your text wasn't the problem. My inability to handle what it meant was. I'm going to show you the 5 reasons why women go silent after messages that seem harmless to you, but feel like emotional landmines to us. Reason number 1. Your text was too perfect. And perfect things terrify me because they usually disappear. Why would someone run from exactly what they want? Because when you've been disappointed enough times, happiness starts feeling like a setup for devastation. That Tuesday morning when you texted, "Hope you have the most amazing day, you deserve it." Those 11 words sent me into a complete spiral. Not because they were wrong, but because they were exactly right. For 43 minutes, I stared at my phone trying to figure out what you wanted in return. What agenda was hiding behind such genuine kindness? I screenshot your message and show it to 3 different friends, asking them to analyze it for hidden meanings. Sarah thinks you're being sweet. Jessica thinks you're love bombing. My brain decides you're testing my reaction to see how emotionally available I am, and suddenly responding feels like walking into a trap I can't identify. By that afternoon, I've convinced myself that responding with equal warmth would reveal too much. But responding casually would hurt your feelings, so I choose the only option that feels safe. Complete silence while I figure out how to match your energy without exposing how much your words affected me. What my therapist later helped me understand was that I was experiencing happiness anxiety. When positive emotions feel more dangerous than negative ones, because they make you hope for things you're afraid to lose. Your text wasn't too much. My capacity to receive genuine care without suspicion was too little. I spend 6 hours crafting 17 different responses and deleting them all because none of them feel like the right way to say, "Thank you for caring about me," without accidentally saying, "I care about you too much." But analyzing your intentions was just the beginning of my emotional shutdown. Reason number 2, your message revealed feelings I'd been hiding from myself, and facing them felt more terrifying than ignoring your text. Here's what happens when someone says exactly what you need to hear. It forces you to acknowledge needs you've been pretending don't exist. A few days later, you text me about missing our conversations when we haven't talked in a while. The moment I read, "I miss talking to you," something inside me cracks open like I've been holding my breath for months, but instead of relief, I feel panic because missing someone means they matter, and mattering means vulnerability I'm not ready to handle. I realize I've been missing you too, desperately, but admitting that feels like handing you power over my emotional state that I've worked years to protect. Your simple statement about missing our talks forces me to confront that our friendship isn't casual for me anymore. It's become something I need to feel okay, and needing people has always ended in disappointment. That evening, I write a response 17 times. "I miss you too" feels too honest. "Same" feels too cold. "Our talks are the best part of my week" feels like confession to a crime I'm not ready to admit I've committed. So I send nothing and spend the next 48 hours wondering if my silence is protecting me or destroying the very thing I'm afraid to lose. The silence wasn't about your text being wrong. It was about your text being so right that it forced me to face feelings I'd been successfully avoiding for months. What I couldn't explain then was that sometimes we go quiet, not because we don't have words, but because the words we have feel too dangerous to risk saying out loud. My stomach churns for days because staying silent feels like lying, but responding honestly feels like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there's water below. When avoiding feelings doesn't make them disappear, the silence deepens. Reason number 3. I convinced myself that not responding was kinder than responding incorrectly and ruining everything we had. Why would someone choose silence over the risk of saying the wrong thing? Because some relationships feel too precious to gamble with imperfect communication. Around that time, you send me a text about something vulnerable. Your anxiety about a job interview, your frustration with your family, your exhaustion from trying to keep everyone happy. My immediate instinct is to pour out support and reassurance, but then I start second-guessing every word. Will offering advice sound condescending? Will emotional support sound too intimate for our friendship? Will casual encouragement sound too detached for something you trusted me with? I draft a response that says exactly what's in my heart, how much I believe in you, how proud I am of your growth, how much I want you to succeed. Then I read it back and it sounds like a love letter disguised as friendship support. I edit it down to something safer, but then it sounds cold and impersonal. I edit again until it's so neutral it says nothing meaningful at all. By the time I've spent 3 hours crafting the perfect response, the moment for natural support has passed. Responding now would require explaining why I took so long, which would mean admitting how much I overthink every interaction with you, which feels like revealing more than I'm ready to share. I develop a physical aversion to my phone during this period because every time it buzzes with your name, I'm reminded of all the messages I've left hanging in the space between honesty and safety. If you're watching this because someone's silence has left you wondering what you did wrong, subscribe now. What I reveal next shows how protection becomes self-destruction in communication. The overthinking escalates when I realize my silence is creating the very problem I was trying to avoid. Reason number 4. I realized my silence was supposed to protect our connection, but it was actually killing it slowly through emotional starvation. Here's the cruel irony of communication anxiety. The safer you try to play things, the more dangerous they become. A few weeks later, you text me something that requires a response. Asking about plans we'd discussed, checking if I'm okay because I've been quiet, offering help with something I'd mentioned struggling with. This time I can't hide behind overthinking, because your text has a clear purpose that my silence would directly ignore. But I've been quiet for so long now that responding feels like admitting I've been ignoring you, which means explaining why, which means revealing all the emotional chaos your perfectly normal messages have been triggering. The longer I wait, the more impossible explaining becomes. I start composing responses that acknowledge my silence. Sorry, I've been MIA. Things have been crazy. Sounds like a lie because you know my schedule. I've been processing some stuff. Sounds too dramatic for text message silence. I needed some space to think. Sounds like I'm angry with you when really I'm terrified of my own feelings. What I discover is that my careful silence, designed to protect our friendship from my emotional complications, has created a gap between us that feels more dangerous than any imperfect response could have been. You start texting less frequently, and I realize I've trained you that reaching out to me brings silence instead of connection. The protection mechanism has become a rejection mechanism, and I'm losing exactly what I was trying so desperately to preserve. My chest tightens every time I see your contact in my phone, because I know I've created a problem that gets more complicated the longer I avoid solving it. But solving it requires admitting I've been avoiding it, which feels impossible. When I finally understand the damage my protective silence has caused, everything becomes clear. Reason number 5. I finally understood that my silence wasn't protecting either of us. It was starving our connection of the honesty it needed to survive. The devastating realization came when I noticed you'd stopped sharing vulnerable things with me completely. And I understood that my pattern of non-response had taught you that emotional openness with me wasn't safe. One morning, you text our group chat about the same job stress you'd tried to share with me weeks earlier. Watching you seek support from friends while I sit in the chat silent. Knowing I could have been the person you turned to if I hadn't been too afraid to respond when you first reached out. That evening, I see you post about an achievement on social media that I know you would have texted me about directly before I started going quiet after your messages. The excitement you would have shared with me is now being shared with everyone, and I realize I've demoted myself from confidant to casual observer through my own emotional cowardice. When you do text me now, it's surface level, weather, work, safe topics that don't require emotional investment. The vulnerable, honest communication I was too scared to engage with has stopped coming entirely, and I understand that my silence wasn't preserving intimacy, it was suffocating it. The cruelest truth hits me. I went quiet to protect our connection from my complicated feelings, but relationships don't survive on protection. They survive on presence, response, and the willingness to be imperfect together rather than perfect apart. My protective silence had become emotional abandonment, and I'd abandoned exactly the person I was most afraid of losing. These 5 reasons reveal the truth about communication withdrawal. Every time I went quiet after your texts, I was choosing fear over connection, and fear is the fastest way to lose what you're trying to protect. Your messages weren't the problem. My inability to trust that imperfect responses could still be loving responses was. The silence I thought was protecting us was actually starving our relationship of the honest communication it needed to grow. Here's what I wish I could have told my overthinking brain. Sometimes the worst thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes an imperfect response that shows you care is infinitely better than perfect silence that makes someone wonder if they matter. Some women go quiet after texts, not because we don't want to respond, but because we want to respond so perfectly that we end up not responding at all. The tragedy isn't that your messages overwhelmed me. The tragedy is that I let my fear of saying the wrong thing prevent me from saying anything, and silence became its own wrong thing. Do I regret every text I left hanging in the space between overthinking and honesty? Every single one. Do I understand why I chose protection over presence? I'm learning that some protection mechanisms protect you right out of the relationships you're trying to save. Would I choose imperfect connection over perfect avoidance if I could do it again? That's what I practice every day now. If you're currently being met with silence after sending messages that felt important to you, maybe they're not ignoring you because they don't care. Maybe they're ignoring you because they care so much that responding feels like emotional cliff diving without a safety net. Maybe the kindest thing you can do is let them know that imperfect responses are better than no responses, that their messy honesty is more valuable than their careful silence. And maybe the most loving thing they can learn is that relationships don't die from imperfect communication. They die from no communication at all. If you want to understand more about how women analyze every detail of your communication, watch my video, She Heard Every Word You Didn't Say. That video will show you exactly why we sometimes hear entire conversations in the spaces between your words, and how hypervigilance in communication can destroy the very connection we're trying to protect.